So this is a look at a Jalira Master Polymorphist deck. This thing was budget when I started about 2 years ago. Problem is, a bunch of card prices change, so I'm not going to worry too much about the dollar signs. Just kind of show you a couple what I feel are kind of unique little ideas. So to start with, you have Jalira, who is kind of like a Proteus staff. I am running one. I'll show you what that is in a second. But it's a 4-drop 2/2 wizard. Nothing really important about that. 2 in a blue, tap, sacrifice another creature, reveal cards from your library until you reveal a non-legendary creature, put that card into the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. Two factors are different from the Proteus staff. One, this does not find legendary creatures. I'll put this up, put them side by side here. Unfortunately, the original mirrored and everything's all washed out. So as you can see here, this says at sorcery speed. She does not. This says it will reveal any creature. It also will work on any creature. So this can both be offensive, defensive, but only at sorcery speed. She can be reactive, but on your own creatures only. So this is a backup, but it's not exactly quite the same thing. What I've done, and I'll kind of play it out for you, this is what most people do when they build a Jalira, is they load their deck with many legendary creatures so that they have targets and you're able to just whiz right past them. So to go through some of the creatures, because obviously this is a creature-based deck, I'll move these out. They'll be coming back up later. So starting mostly on curve, you have Hope of Girapor. You can use the ability, but it's mostly there because it costs 1. Like, it's the only, like, 1-drop legendary that I'm aware of that blue can use. Moving in 2 drops, Tetsuo. It can make some things unblockable. It itself can be unblockable. It's mostly there as a 2-drop. I know that's going to be kind of depressing for a little bit. Kami of the Crescent Moon. So that is definitely a usable ability. I'm not going to say it's not. I don't mind having it in play, but at the same time, this is not a Kami of the Crescent Moon deck, so it might do some work. Usually it's just going to get sacrificed to the Polymorphist. Kefnet the Mindful. This is interesting because, so see, it's a 5/5. It can't attack or block unless you have 7 cards in your hand. You kind of might be there, but at the same time, having it just to repeatedly draw cards. So it's basically a legendary Azure Mage or a Spectral Sailor if you're looking at newer cards. It has its uses. Naru Meha. Not a wizard's deck, but at the same time, its ability to copy an instant or sorcery might come up. I'll show you a couple of ones that copying might be really fun. Zaphid, the Jinn of the Lamp. So he is, or it rather, I think technically most Jinns are he. But the ability to pay 4 and tap an artifact, and there's going to be some artifacts. Getting a 5/6 flyer, I'm not really going to feel bad about playing that, putting down some muscle. This is a recent addition. So Unesh, basically it kind of does a slightly smaller factor fiction. You real top 4 cards of your library, and opponent separates them in 2 piles. So you're probably going to be getting generally 2/2 splits, 1/3 splits. No one in the right mind is going to give you a 0/4 split. But anyway. Making Sphinx cast a little bit less. I'll show you. I've added a few more, actually. Now, recently, there are some extra legendary Sphinx. So, Artemis the All-Seeing. Kind of pricey. 6 mana for a 4/5. Not great. It does catalog. If you're unfamiliar with the card, it's 2 in a blue. Draw 2 cards, discard 1 card. This has some uses. Now, obviously, the ability to knock a player out of the game, it's there. I'm not going to say it can't be used. I'm just saying I'm not expecting it. The bigger parts are, 1, it's legendary. 2, it has this catalog ability, which is going to come up here and there. Alhammaret, the High Arbiter. So this, obviously, if you've ever seen these in use, usually in Unesh, most Alhammaret, people who liked Alhammaret just put it into Unesh. All your opponents same time reveal their hand, so everyone gets to see everybody's hand. That's cool. It's not just look at your opponent's hand, it's reveal. So you can kind of mess up the board a little bit. Everyone now knows what's coming, and you can shut down 1 card. Now, obviously, just depending on board state, it's usually going to be a board wipe, maybe a piece of pinpoint, maybe a combo piece, maybe even just their general. You don't have to name a card that is in... you do have to name a card that is revealed this way. So at the very least, you do need to you can't name their general unless their general or commander rather is in their hand. But getting him to cost less is fine. So now we're getting into, well, what am I actually using Jalira for? Djinn of Infinite Deceits. This is an average card. It's really cheap because it came out in a set and no one really has a desire to use it. Exchanging control of 2 non-legendary creatures. Well, okay. This deck's going to make some tokens, so obviously exchanging tokens for other things is pretty good. It's a 2/7, so it's going to survive most forms of direct damage. That's pretty cool. Stormtide Leviathan. Awesome. Old favorite. The fact that all lands are islands means it's going to kick on the island walk. Creatures without flying or island walk can't attack. So you might be able to get some politics going on that. You can just tell people, hey, I've shut down the board for a little while. We have some time to rest, and I won't attack anyone. Or maybe you do. Here's another Sphinx I was already running. Whenever you cycle discard another card, scry 1. It cycles for 1. It is a 4-mana, 4/4 flyer. Basically, this card's good at almost all points in the game, whether it's for the scry ability, the cycling ability, or just the fact that it's another Sphinx to trigger Unesh. Phyrexian Jester. Basically, blue's duplicant. It comes into play, exile a non-token creature. It's just a vanilla large body. That's all. But it's a beast. I'll show you why that matters in a second. So Gargoyle. Nullstone Gargoyle. Whenever the first non-creature spell each turn is played, counter that spell. So maybe, depending on when or if this guy comes online, you can really start playing a more controlling game. You can change the way this game goes, because you are essentially a creature-focused deck. Whether or not they believe that is up to you. Scourge of the Fleets. When Scourge of the Fleets enters the battlefield, return each creature the opponent's control, emphasis there, with toughness X or less, where X is the number of islands you control. Since we're mono blue and I'm trying to run on budget, he just makes awesome sense. Just fits him perfectly. Here's why creature types matter. You sacrifice the Riptide Shapeshifter, name a creature type, and basically just flip into that creature. I'll set him aside. You don't call Sphinx anymore. You used to be able to call Sphinx. Avatar. Here's the Avatar. Like most of these creatures that I have set up here are one of creature types. So you're not going to accidentally, you're going to find the right tool for the job. When Diluvian Primordial enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may cast up to 1 instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost, and then basically exile that card. When this comes online is generally up to you. Wow, can't talk today. Jalira flipping into it's not as good as being able to search it out, but it's still useful. Perplexing Chimera. This one's just fun. It's a 3/3 for 5. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may exchange control of Perplexing Chimera. If you do, you may choose new targets for that spell. So the spell, as you can see there, it says if it becomes a permanent, you can control it. Steal planeswalkers, do whatever. And depending on Jalira, since Jalira doesn't cast a spell, you can trade this with someone, and this thing will just keep running the table. So that's pretty cool. But just real quick to reiterate for the Shapeshifter. So creature types matter. There's a Chimera. If you want to start messing with the table, there's an Avatar. There's your only Kraken. Gargoyle, Beast, Sphinx doesn't work. Leviathan. We have Legendary Djinn, so you wouldn't name Djinn because there is Djinn. But you still have some targets. There's your only God. So you still have some different options. Also, technically, if you wanted to switch to it, there's your only Spirit. I believe. I probably should know my own deck better, right? Going into some of the spells, so let me set that stuff aside. Going into the spells, here's where prices started to go quickly. Swiftfoot Boots, because you want to protect your creatures and commander. Greaves, well, they're up there in price again. Pick them up if you can. This one is a cheaper version. Obviously, it doesn't give haste, but the fact that it basically gets Shroud. Basically, that's kind of the way it's phrased. So you have your regular equip cost. The big one here is that for 2 blue, you can attach this at instant speed. So you can cancel out. If you have 2 blue floating around, you can, absolutely shut down some targeting. This is probably one of the more important pieces just because it lets you play the game at instant speed and shut them down. Muddle Mixture, obviously it's its primary use is to go off and find those equipment. You'll notice all three of these equipment here, if I can somewhat get them in shot, are all 2-drops. So the muddle is mostly there to go off and find the equipment because it makes the deck work that much smoother. And for this deck, it's kind of clunky, but you'll see there's some fun stuff to be done. Obviously, if you need to counter an instant sorcery, it's there. River's Rebuke, 6 mana, shut down basically one player, just reset their board real hard. You know when you have to use it, and usually once this is cast on someone, they're probably going to be knocked out at the table. See Beyond and Latnam's Legacy, kind of the same card, but not. This draws 2 cards first, then shuffles. This one shuffles, then draws 2 cards, and it is the next upkeep. This one can mess you over because the same card you shuffle away, you might end up drawing. This one you will not. Basically, in case you get creatures in your hand that you want back in your deck. That's the big thing. And because you really don't want to be casting your non-legendaries for the most part. Telling Time, it gets cards. There's nothing really special there. Basically, it's most of these filters are to make sure you don't draw the cards that you want. This one draws 3, puts 2 back. Probably one of the more powerful ones for triggering Jalira. There's another board wipe, only one side. Just getting mana. Some of these aren't really in order. I'm sorry about that. So this one's fun. When I was talking about spells that sometimes can be played around with. So instant speed, very important. Exile all creatures you control. At the beginning of your next upkeep, reveal cards from top of your library until you reveal that many creature cards. Put all creatures revealed this way onto the battlefield and the rest back on the bottom of your library. So you'll see how many token makers there are. Getting 3 or 4 creatures on this is amazing. You don't really have to go even crazier than that. And obviously your general will just go back to the command zone. Ada Spout shuts down a player for real good because it puts them on top or bottom of the library. So you can send away some of those creatures. For 1 less, we just send them back to their hand. Biden Thassa. So basically just the simple fact that you're going to have a bunch of creatures. You're going to have some creatures that are evasive because of Island Walk or flying. Draw some cards off it. Also, you can force an opponent to attack, which don't take that for granted if they've got a worse board presence than you. Poor Man's Fact or Fiction. Discard an island, another card to play its instead of paying its mana cost. So you have a spell if you need it. Sorry. So it's kind of a counter. It's just free counter spell. You'll need it from time to time. So here we are. We'll get into a couple of cards that are more synergistic. So it's a mana rock, and it turns into a creature for the sake of sacking, because many times you need non-legendary. I know that doesn't make a lot of sense. You need ways of setting off Jalira that aren't going to be found by Jalira. So many times, that's be token producers. Turns into a creature. Yes, paying an extra 2 is not the greatest. It can pay for itself. Krontog. Effectively the same thing, except it makes blue mana. Very important for that sometimes. Mind Stone, it's never dead. More mana. More mana. Most of these, you don't care what color the mana is. You just need more mana. More mana. So this is a very recent addition. This literally is because of Unesh. Because it makes 2/2 changelings. That just got the nod because of Unesh, because it's whenever it enters the battlefield. So with these 2 in play, you basically are able to do Fact or Fiction repeatedly. If the Unesh combo doesn't really suit you, that can become another token producer. I just took one out because I want to try this more with Unesh. It is pricey when it comes to mana. 3 to drop is not the worst, but 4 to activate is really rough. So obviously, just with Unesh. Here are some of my tricks, if you want to call it that. Counter-target creature spell, make a 1/1 spirit with flying. Ta-da! It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. I would argue in any deck but this. Again, you basically just trying to get a creature in play so that Jalira can work. Back up to that, it makes a 2/2, but it doesn't fly. Not that it really matters, but basically the same exact thing. It is counter-target creature spell, so counter whatever you want. Scatter the Winds. This one's fun. So, Noyandar runs this. So, 6 mana. It can counterspell and make a 3/3, but you will end up losing a land for it. So, it's either a cancel with an extra option, or if it makes a guy for Jalira. Drakehaven, this one's going to come up a few times, so I'm going to set off to the side. Cycle or discard, pay 1, make a token. This is slower, because obviously it's 3 drop than 1 to use, but it does work with him, because there is a discard effect, so you can end up making more guys. I'll set this off the side, I'll come back. Early play, because most of the token producers are 3-4 mana, so this is simply there. Being put in the graveyard is not going to happen often. There is a way to do it. I will bring that up. But at least there is an early drop. You can still drop it before Jalira, so the creature will be there. Here is the way. This, I've called it that. Many people have called it that before. It is basically an artifact. It's a poor man's Planeswalker. It gives you 4 options that you can do just about anything. Discarding a card works with Drakehaven. Or you can just make a goat. Right there. Boom. Makes a token. Makes a goat. Sacrifice a creature. Return an artifact. There are a few you might want to bring back. Sacrifice an artifact. Draw a card. Well, there we go. For this deck, there is no mode on here that is not playable, which that's what makes me really happy. So this one is a somewhat of an odd inclusion, but just like Trading Post, every mode is what you want. You make tokens. It'll put an extra land into play. It'll gain you some life. There, admittedly, might not always be the ability you want to resolve, but every mode in this deck is viable. Big thing here, yes, you're losing a land, but it's free. So once this thing comes out, you make creatures for free. Obviously, you're not going to use it to overwhelm people. Cycling Suite. I have cut this down to almost bare minimum. The big part here is that the ones I kept are going to be playable for either its cycling or for its ability. So either way, you're paying 3. One is a force spike, one is a mana leak, but you still have the instant game. This obviously is a little bit more rough. It does still count as cycling, even though it doesn't say regular cycling. Land cycling is still cycling, so it does count for Drakehaven. 5 mana counter spells, not great. It really is not, but the option's there. Most time you're going off to find a basic land. This is another one of the decks where I want to keep playing lands every turn. It's good early and cycles late. It's just another counter spell. Same thing, only it's more like it's good late, or you can cycle away early, kind of the inverse, but if you need it. Turning something into an island seems foolish, but you do have that island walker. Like, that's the whole thing. You do have an island walker. So it's there. If you need to turn an extra land into an island, you can for the Kraken. I had a card I just recently cut. I'll bring that in at the end to kind of show you why that one's a little more fun to play with. So, very few of you probably remember this card. It's not great. 2 mana but it's basically just another counter spell. Like, that's the whole thing. You just cast it and blank out someone's removal, or you cycle for a single blue. It does what it needs to do. 3 mana Boomerang, not great, has cycling. Rebuild, when it's good, it's good. But at the same time, it doesn't take up main deck space because it can be cycled. This one is expensive in that it's 7 mana. 7 mana to steal a permanent, not great, but as always, if the game goes long, you're playing 1v1, it's a slow table, steal a Planeswalker, steal a Titan, whatever, and it can be cycled. So as you can see, those are mostly control cycling cards. We've gone through most of the main deck onto the lands, which, I know, exciting, right? There we go. It becomes a 2/2, so basically trading 1 land for a better creature. Can be played as a morph. Nice trick here. Play it as a morph, you can then flip it, so you can kind of actually accelerate yourself. This one has hidden uses, so you can pay 5 mana to basically get an additional land into play if need be, or obviously it's a morph for the sake of Jalira. Makes 2 Thopters. That's basically it. It's slow at 5 mana. I'm not saying I like it, but it's there. So now we're going to get into deck thinning. So we have Esper Panorama, Evolving Wilds, Grixis Panorama. All these just get basic island. This was cheaper. Now it's not, so, you know, you've been warned. Cycling Land. Cycling Land. Cycling Land. Ah, here we go. Comes in, scries 1, comes in play untapped. So, doesn't really take up a lot of deck space. If the game goes long enough, you need 2 cards. This one, This is a little up there in price. If you're a budget player, I'm going to highly recommend you get one of these for your mono decks or for any of the decks that don't run a lot of non-basics. This definitely was a sleeper card for a very, 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 very long time because we didn't have this format at that point. Being able to kind of sort of rampant growth your basics in, pretty good. This is a recent nod to the fact that this card exists. If you truly want to play the game at a draw-go style, activate this to bring in Jalira. You'll know when the time is right. It's dead sometimes, but also it sets up a it gives you the ability to play the game at instant speed. Scavenger Ground. Sacrifice a desert, exile all cards from all graveyards. You'll know when you need it. It itself is a desert, comes in play untapped, but I have this guy. Cycling Land is a desert. Basically, the Rivulet is there for Scavenger Ground. It's really not there to be used as a land, and milling the top 4 cards, I mean, like, I'm not running a ton of deserts, and milling someone for 4 is not really the way things need to go. I mean, obviously, if they have 3 cards left, you know, yes, it can win a game, but you're insane. Bunch of islands. I'm running 39 lands because I need lands every turn. Things like Unesh, Lay Claim, they're, you know, them costing 7 mana is kind of insane. Let's go over a couple cards that might be considered for you. Basically, it's a blue pacifism. Big thing there is it removes all abilities. It's a great 1-for-1 with a commander. No way to find it, so it's just there. Let me set that aside. This easily can become a hybrid Unesh deck. Let me pull aside the card that I had to set aside because they become hilarious. There we are. Okay, so if you were bored, so the previous reason that I had islands matter, I had Inkwell Leviathan, Shroud, Island Walk. It's just huge. So in other words, basically, if you want to hit someone in the face, there's that. And then the other fun one, let's see if this shows up well enough on camera. There we go. Island Walk, when it attacks, you may exile target creature card defending player control. So basically, he is a repeatable Oblivion Ring. That's, well, it'd be Journey to Nowhere. But anyway, the point still being, if you threw Shroud or Hexproof on him and just repeatedly keep sniping a creature from someone, that's kind of fun. But that's up to you. I cut this for Emergence Zone because since I want to lay lands every turn, it's helpful, but at the same time, it needs the opponent to be ahead of you. That doesn't work. And you can't even use a Scry ability unless they have lands ahead of you. So it's not even just like a land that scries one. The design it had the right idea, it just wasn't that great. Cards I cut to make room for the Sphinxes. So obviously he's just there as a 2-drop legendary. That's it. So if you want to keep the deck cheap, there's him. There's that Philidibip, whatever, the Cyclops that draws cards. It's made a 2-drop version of him. Retrofitter. The big thing is, obviously, comes in for 1. If you want to keep dumping mana to make extra tokens, that works with that spell that will let you dump all your creatures. Now, let's just say you want to turn this into an Unesh deck. I'll give you 5 seconds on how to do this. So, going through the Sphinxes that are cheap and easy to afford. Basically, when it untaps, you get to get an extra card, you know, into play. So, pretty good. This one's alright. The big thing is whenever it attacks Scry 3 and it can protect itself, that's cool. There he is again. One too many. Chancellor of the Sphinx, Chancellor of the Spires, rather. The reason that this isn't in there already is because the Primordial. Primordial does it better. You want to play this if you are playing for the Sphinx. Obviously, Factor Fixing Sphinx is pretty good in Unesh. Can't be countered. It has hexproof, and your instant sorcerers can't be countered. Okay, but Unesh draws cards, gets bigger. Cool. This one has a bunch of random stuff. It's kind of a fun card, but this is definitely an Unesh card. I don't know how else to say that. Unesh is set up so that you want people to not be drawing cards, and this works with that. Players can't draw cards because Unesh doesn't draw the cards. The cards are just put into your hand. Same thing there. It circumvents the Uba Mask. Blue creatures cost less, lets you target guys. I'll show you why that matters. Another sort of counterspell. This is why targeting matters. Basically, each of their creatures becomes those illusions that explode, which at 7 mana, but if you're playing Unesh, maybe, there's another card that doesn't put cards into your hand. And there's a Sphinx that makes Thopter tokens. I'm dropping stuff off. There's a Mana War Sphinx. You'll know 6 mana for a 5/5. Not the worst. There's an even better version. I mean, it bounces a non-land, but you surveil 4. It's whatever. The other card, just off camera. So whenever you target opponent's creatures, they become yours as long as he's in play. She, they, whomever. It's a backup to whenever a creature becomes targeted, return to its owner's hand. But you control that. There's another one. There's another Sphinx out there. Whenever you cycle or discard a card, target creature gets -2/-0. But that's just if you want to turn this into an Unesh deck, which I'm not saying you want to. And just because I can, I don't have a Sapperling token yet, but those are the tokens you're going to need. Hooray! I hope this kind of gives you an idea of if you want to play Jalira. It's not as good as it seems. I'm going to be brutally honest on that. It's either the most busted combo deck akin to Arkham Dagson, or you're playing it fun and fair like this. So, on an A to F scale, this is like a C+. I'd like to say it's a B-. It's very slow. It's very mana hungry. So you get if you get into a counterspell fight or you can't get into a counterspell fight, you're going to find yourself on the wrong side of things. The creatures I'm flipping into, I don't have. I think Scourge of Fleets. Scourge of Fleets is my only mass answer that I can tutor for because I can't get Washout. I don't have any specific search for Washout. I could go find if you wanted to include Turbulent Dreams for Muddle the Mixture, maybe. But what you're basically looking at is make tokens, use Jalira, get big guys in play. I like this because it is sort of like a blue Reanimator deck. You get a bunch of fat bodies to do stuff. It also allows me to basically play Unesh without making a deck that says, I'm playing Unesh and you have to get value. I prefer the variety and answers of Jalira over Unesh. So this is just one of those things where you can play Unesh. You can get thanks to that new the burrows, the ability to put out changelings. It's not great. It's not smooth. It's very mana intensive, but it's fun. So if you wanted a lower power deck, and I know many of you are questioning why you would want that, it just depends on your meta. Do you want a deck that because this is not an easy deck to pilot. You have to know which mode you're in. Are you trying to play counterspells? Are you actually trying to play bodies? What are you doing? This is a very flexible deck, but it is going to take some skill. You can't just flop this on someone, because otherwise you're going to be looking at a bunch of cycling cards just going, I don't get how this works. And they're going to be sending away all their answers. This acts slower.